Hey everyone, welcome to an evening with Gena. This is Heather with the Old Schoolhouse, and I am so excited to introduce Gena Suarez of the Old Schoolhouse. She really doesn't need much of an introduction. Most of you know her. For those of you who don't, you're going to have a real treat tonight getting to know her and the company. And make sure you share this video with your friends, get it out there, because we have a special giveaway that we are going to be offering to one person who leaves a comment. So throughout our talk tonight, if you could leave a comment about what we're talking about, and we will pick one winner from the comment section, and you will win a 1-year membership to schoolhouseteachers.com. So get it out there, let everyone know. And I'm now going to introduce Gena. She is the publisher, along with her husband, of the Old Schoolhouse magazine, and she has created basically a homeschooling empire. It's been around 20 years. Not only does she have the trade magazine, but also schoolhouseteachers.com, which provides over 400 courses, plus many, many, many other branches that have formed off the company over the past 20 years. And I'm really looking forward to talking about the past 20 years of the Old Schoolhouse. Hi, Gena. Thank you for joining me today.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
So I would love if you could introduce yourself and tell us about your family.
Yeah, well, my husband is Paul and I'm Gena, and we have 7 children. We have a bunch of grandchildren. And I'll tell you what, time has just flown because it feels like we just got married yesterday and started having kids, and you blink. And all these years later, we've been married for 33 years. And I don't know. I think my life is very full. It's very, very full, and we're grateful to God for that. But 20 years ago, we started this magazine just so that we could be home together. That was really the main reason, so we could work from home. And God has really blessed it. And so here we are, a bunch of kids and grandkids later, and just still moving fast and forward.
Awesome. So those of you watching, if you want to leave a message in the comments about why did you start homeschooling, just a quick 1 or 2 sentence answer why you start homeschooling. And Gena, TOS has been around for 20 years. That's absolutely incredible. Can you tell us how it got its start?
Yeah, actually, it started off just as an eBay business. So I was always, even when I was like in my early 20s and I was a newly married mom, started having babies right away. And my husband worked very hard, and he never seemed to have a job that was like 8 to 5 or just like an 8-hour job. It was always these very, very long hours kind of jobs. So for example, he's an artist, and he managed a foundry, a bronze foundry, for many, many years. And he was gone from super early in the morning until pretty late at night, but he was casting bronze monuments and statues, and he would travel around with his boss. The 2 guys would go off and install these massive bronze monuments and statues and sculptures all over the place, all over the US. And
Wow.
he was sculpting. He was actually helping sculpt them as well. And so he started doing his own art, and we sold some, and we were doing that. But see, our mind was always pointed toward how can we stay home, work from home, be together. And so my brain kind of went toward just anything. I actually came up with lots of different ideas. Everything failed. Nothing really worked. That's why they say you keep trying and trying, fail a whole bunch of times, and then on maybe the 100th time you'll succeed. But I didn't even know really much about publishing. Didn't have any degree or anything like that. And but I had a little eBay store because I was very interested in this new thing called going online. This is back in the 90s and was just getting started. And eBay came on the scene, and eBay was really big. It's not big anymore. It's nothing like it was. It was this auction site, and people would get on there and they would be auctioning away their stuff, like a yard sale, or their art, or their, in my case, or their clothing, anything you could think of. And they would take pictures of it and upload it, and they would sell it. And when they would list it, people would start bidding on it, and they would start fighting over your stuff. And to me, that was the most exciting thing. I just thought that was the coolest, because if only somebody would fight over something of mine, and the price would drive way up, and I would have this little chunk of change. And that did happen, but it happened later. I was very non-techie, and I didn't have a camera. And the very idea of trying to upload photos anywhere scared me. So I didn't even want to go there. So I thought, well, what can I sell? What can I sell on eBay that I don't have to take pictures of? But I was a good writer and I was a good editor. So I knew I could write descriptions. That wasn't going to be a problem,
Mm,
but it was going to be a problem to get photos or graphics. So I thought, how about books? I can do books. And I was a homeschool mom and I had tons of curriculum anyway. And I was an avid yard sailor and thrift store shopper. And so I just had and I knew how to go and get that sort of thing, curriculum. And so I started listing curriculum and I would put just a lot of flair with my descriptions and I would put titles and just make it very homey and fun. I named my eBay shop called the Old Schoolhouse and it took off. I had thousands of customers from all around the world, countries I had
wow.
never heard of even, and repeat buyers. But with that came a lot of questions about homeschooling. Obviously, the audience I was attracting were homeschool families that were wanting my homeschool curriculum. And they would ask these questions, and I would answer the same thing all the time. It was always the same type of question, like, well, how do you homeschool a bunch of kids, different ages, all at the same time? Or what about socialization? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought, I should just make like a little newsletter. I should just make a newsletter. It could be kind of fun. I wasn't even thinking really magazine. I was just thinking newsletter. And I loved sales and marketing. That's always been something very compelling and interesting to me. And I thought, maybe this newsletter, I could even sell some advertising in there to some of these curriculum companies out there. So we got this website going. It was beautiful. And I did not create it because I can't do things like that. But I had a friend who her husband was just brilliant. And he created the first website, the Old Schoolhouse website. And this newsletter went out. The problem is I sent it out by email to my thousands of eBay customers. And then eBay got a hold of me and they said, you can't do that. That's called spam. This is back in like 2000 or 2001. And I thought, oh no, okay, I can't spam. I can't do that. And so there wasn't a rule though against mailing stuff out. And so since I
Mm,
had their addresses because they were my customers, I talked to my husband and I said, well, what do you say? We still send the newsletter out. I can't do it by email, but we could go print it up and real cheap, but of course it was under $1,000, but still that was a lot of money at the time because, we had to come up with like $700. We went to a little cheapy Xeroxy place and
mm,
got this thing out there, but it took off after that. It took off and the companies wanted to buy ads because they liked our website. It was beautiful and
ah,
we had lots of traffic and stuff. So that's how it got started. That little newsletter from an eBay store took off and turned into a beautiful, hundred. Some of our magazines have been as thick as over 300 pages, our annual ones, but the average is 125 pages, something like that.
right.
And God has really blessed it. So it grew very quickly. But over 20 years, it's seen a lot of changes and a lot of improvements and big staff, wonderful team that works with us. So that's the story of how that got started.
I love how you saying that you started with eBay when it first started because you were able to get in when it was still in its early stages. And I feel like that's the same with the homeschool market. You were able to get in through the magazine in its early stages. And throughout the past 20 years, you said before you started the eBay business, you tried some things and failed. It's a good lesson because over the past 20 years, I'm sure you tried some things with the company that didn't work, but then you saw some things that really took off and really succeeded. And I just see you just as such an innovator where you are starting things before anybody else. You can kind of see the writing on the wall, so to speak, of, where to go. And I see that with the eBay business and with the magazine. And I'm really curious, over the past 20 years, what has surprised you the most about the company?
Um, as far as the company goes, I've been surprised a million times, but I've also seen a lot of the same thing happening over and over. So there's a lot of patterns, and I've learned from mistakes. And um, I think the neat thing has been just the staff. We have a really neat, wonderful staff, and without that, if you don't have a great staff, you've got nothing. You've got absolutely nothing because the team that you surround yourself with, they are the ones who make everything run, and they're the ones who get they attract the audience. I mean, I can't even take any credit, honestly. There are the things I've done are a little bit visionary, but I'll tell you what, I have failed so many times. So let me give you an example. Early in the company, probably it had been going about 5 years. And we had tried different things, and some things worked and some things didn't. And we took some really big risks. So I'll tell you, we lived in California, and the company had been going for maybe 3 or 4 years. But California is so expensive and politically so crummy. It's got problems. California's got problems. And we wanted to get out of there. We had four little kids, and we wanted to get into a more family friendly area. And so, we were looking at Tennessee, which was where we ended up. But we took quite a risk. We sold our house in order to keep the company going. The company was, we weren't doing enough. A magazine is very expensive, incredible, lots of overhead. And I can't describe to you how very expensive it is. In fact, other magazines that have been our competitors in the past, they've come and gone, and or folks will try to start a magazine and they'll do one issue and then they're out because they don't realize how incredibly complex and how expensive it is. And so we didn't know. We just started with this little newsletter, which was cheap to print, $700. But then the print bills for a magazine, our print bills have been as high as 50,000 or higher just for the print bill. That's a lot of money for one issue. And so we didn't see that. Had we been able to see that back then, looking forward, I'm not sure we would have continued because it would have scared us. But so we found ourselves in a quandary about 3 years in where the company wasn't really able to support itself with just being a magazine. We didn't have enough subscribers. We did have a lot, but not nearly enough to pay those kind of print bills, plus staff and postage. Postage is outrageous. And so we would come up with different ideas. And one idea we had was, let's sell our house. We had a house with 7 acres that we had bought. It was like a repossessed house we bought early on. And so we got it really cheap, and we were able to sell it for like 3 times as much as we paid for it. It was at the height of the market in California. And we thought we can take this and really make the magazine a better company and on more solid ground, get some feet under us where we're either going to, and I looked at my husband, I said, what do you want to do? Because he was, I think he had just stopped working, outside of the home, and he had come home. He came home pretty early on, like 2 years into it. He's been home ever since, working with me. We worked together with the magazine and raised the kids. But I just I didn't want to pressure him into, my goodness, I don't want to put all this money into this company. Are you on board? He was like, I am so on board. He said, this, God has given us this. This is like a ministry. We want to do this as long as God will allow us to. And so let's sell the house if God allows it to sell, and we can get out of here into a much cheaper, more affordable, more family friendly place like Tennessee. Then that's going to really help. And we're committed. This will get us some bias a little while to find ways to make the magazine more profitable and to learn what we're doing. My word, we were just so early in this thing. We didn't even know what we were doing at all. And so we did it and God blessed it. And that's exactly what happened. And so that was something that worked, although it was risky. But here's a funny thing. About 5 years or 6 years into it, we decided, well, let's start an auction community, kind of like eBay. Let's start an auction community. And I can't remember what we called it. It was like, I don't even remember. We had a domain and everything, but I don't remember what it was called. Homeschoolauction.com, maybe. I don't even know. It's no longer. And at first it started off, and I'll tell you what, we put 50 grand into this thing. We paid big time staff to get this thing out there. And it was pricey. And it was a ton of work and a lot of promotions. And at first it took off, and then it fell flat on its face. It did a big old belly flop. It totally failed. And it's like, you know what? We just picked ourselves up and dusted ourselves off and thought, well, not everything is going to work. And we know that. And I would tell anybody who is a business owner or someone who works from home, if you're going to do a business at home, if you're going to do anything like that, you got to have a thick skin and recognize you're going to fail a whole bunch of times before you succeed. And there's going to be some ideas that you think that are just so smart in your mind, but they turn out to be dumb ideas that didn't work or whatever, and so it's been a lot of trial and error. And so we have come up with several different things that we started, and maybe they flopped, and then other things that just took off like a rocket, like schoolhouseteachers.com. That thing took off like a rocket. Praise God. And that was what that getting our legs under us helped us to do. That bridged us. When we sold the house and moved to Tennessee, we were able to put the things in place that allowed us to then start other ancillary divisions of the company that really did help prop up and support the publishing side, because the publishing side, as I mentioned, is so expensive, but we didn't want a cheap product. We didn't, if you go to Barnes and Noble, most of the magazines have a staple in them, not a spine, for example. It's called saddle stitch versus perfect bind. We're perfect bound. Um, so things like that, and just being four color throughout, and the glossy paper and the UV covers, the things that we wanted, that we found very important for quality. We wanted to deliver a quality product, I should say,
Right.
to our customers, and not something that looked homemade, and because back then, in the very early days of homeschooling, the companies out there that sell readily today to homeschoolers, they either didn't exist, or the early companies, a lot of them didn't want to. They were a few of them, the few that curriculum companies that were Christian that were around. Some of them were like, no, we don't sell to homeschoolers. We only sell to Christian schools. You have to be a teacher or a school administrator before we're going to sell to you. And so what happened was all these homeschool parents, homeschooling exploded in the 90s. It grew, grew, grew. A lot of smart parents, brilliant parents came forward in their own way. They were creating curriculum. They were doing it for their family. And then,
Yeah.
people would find out about it, and they would want the curriculum. So they were doing it on their computers. It was home job, but it was still great curriculum. It was beautiful. But a lot of publishers got their start that way. Publishers that rose up and became actual real publishers and curriculum providers on a national level, worldwide level. But some of their stuff looked very printed on a home computer. And so while that was all they had, and a lot of it was excellent in content, there's nothing wrong with it. We felt like, you know what, we just want to be high quality all the way. And so we did make sacrifices and try to do different things that we could do to keep that, even though the cost was so high, the overhead was super high. We did not want to go backwards and make, a product that didn't look like something you would see in a store. And we're in Walmart today. We're in Walmart, Target, Barnes and Noble, Sears. We're even in some tractor stores, which I love. I feel like that's our audience. Tractor
Yeah,
stores. It's
sure.
perfect. But so that was the long answer. You probably were looking for a much shorter answer to all of that.
No, that was inspiring. I mean, and I like how you just had a shout out to, if there's any business owners out there, just to be willing to fail and try again, because I mean, you just never know. And I'm glad that you did try again and became the company that you are today. And as we mentioned before, it's been 20 years. And I would love to hear your thoughts on how you think homeschooling. I mean, you've seen a lot through the company. You've met a lot of people, even in contact with just such a wide variety of people throughout the past 20 years. How do you think homeschooling has changed the most over these past 20 years?
Oh, it has changed so much. It's incredible how much it's changed, because back when I first started homeschooling in the very early 90s, um, they even look differently. I mean, now you've got the millennials that are homeschooling their kids, and it's amazing. It is so wild. The difference when I go to conventions. So when I went to conventions in the early years of homeschooling, or the early years of this magazine company, um, the parents they were like myself and or older, and the kids were, I can't describe it. It's so totally different. It has morphed homeschool, and I think there's good and bad that come with that, but I do think it's really neat how millennial kids, who they themselves were homeschooled, somehow their parents have beautifully placed into those children the importance of keeping your child close to you, to raise them up in the Lord. It's important to homeschool. It's important not to place your child in the government school system where they're lost. Most of them end up lost, not all of them, but most of them, research has shown that most of them, by the time they graduate, they abandon the faith. But these parents in the 80s and 90s who were homeschooling, and some of them were sacrificing. I know several people who, and a lot of them are leaders now with their state boards, or their curriculum providers, people who, and they're probably like in their 60s now as far as age goes, but back in the 80s, they were getting arrested. They were being thrown in jail for homeschooling. So we call them the pioneers, and they had the most conviction. I don't know that there's huge amounts of conviction today, not because of any other reason, except for when you go through trials like that and you are being threatened with jail or being told, no, you will not do that. Or maybe you're the only person in your town who homeschools. That's how it was in the 80s for these parents who were just getting started and leading this movement. And I'll tell you, what a tribute to them. My hat is off to them. I feel like they deserve such honor. I came after that. I was homeschooling in the 90s, like the mid 90s onward. And so it was already really very popular by that time. But then as time has gone by, the other thing that has changed is curriculum fairs and conventions. Back in the 90s, everybody went to their state convention, and I think that is so very important. They were members of their state board, whatever that. Most states have a state homeschooling board, a big one, a Christian state board. Like in California, it's called CHIA, California Home Educators Association, and every state has one. And back in the 90s, everybody who was a Christian homeschooler in their states, they belonged to those boards. They were members. They paid like a monthly or a yearly amount. It wasn't a ton, but that provided for their support. They were able to then, if trouble was to arise or problems, or if they needed help or any kind of support, they could call those state leaders, and those state leaders were there for them. And those state leaders are still there for them today. The only difference is that a lot of people no longer find the need to go and be a part of their state organization. And to me, that's a crying shame. And I know the reason for it. It's because of the internet. We've got Facebook now, and we've got Pinterest now, and we've got Twitter, and we have online webinars, and even this information that we're doing right now. I'm hopeful that new homeschoolers will tune in or watch the repeat later, just to hear about homeschooling and how it works or whatever. And that's a great thing. But a lot of people figure, well, I don't need my homeschool support group or my state board, and I don't need to go to my convention. And that's too bad, because the conventions, that is where you would go and get your curriculum. That is where you'd go and meet up with lots of other like-minded families and be encouraged and be inspired, but also to listen to these speakers, these wonderful speakers who would come specifically to the conventions to keynote and to talk with a literally big roomfuls of 1,000 people. 5,000 people would show up at these things. Sometimes as many as 10,000 people would come, like to the FPEA, the Florida convention. And while those conventions are still happening, they've gotten kind of wacky because other convention companies have come in and tried to be the big convention in the region. And that has kind of wiped out some of these state organization conventions, which is where they get their revenue to cover their expenses. Again, remember, they're supporting all these new homeschoolers and present day homeschoolers all year long. And so what's sad about that is that a lot of them went under. A lot of them couldn't, they had to let go of a lot of their staff. A lot of them, maybe they're still holding on and they're still doing their convention, but half the people come now that came in the 90s. Well, it should be triple, because look how much homeschooling has grown. But I think people nowadays feel like, well, I can get my information and support online. I have so many Facebook friends and we talk and blah, blah, blah. And that's great. I love that. But I think it's so important to get together, to be with people, to show up at these things and to support each other in person, and to listen to these speakers who are just worth their weight in gold. They have so much to say, and the stories that they share, and the history of homeschooling, those pioneer days, those early days that the average person today homeschooling, or the new homeschooler, they have no idea the freedoms that we have in homeschooling that were fought, all the battles that were fought to even have these freedoms that we are so blessed to have today. They don't know. And so what happens when you don't know about the freedoms and how hard someone else fought for them? You don't really care so much anymore. You can grow complacent. You're grateful that you can homeschool, but you realize too, you can quit just as easily, and you just don't really need anybody. So that's been the biggest change, and that's been disheartening. Although we still go to conventions and have a booth and talk to newbies, and there are many who do come, and there are many who still do go and want to be a part of their state organization. And we work with a lot of state organization leaders, and we really try to encourage them and to let them know, listen, we only support you guys. We don't support these national convention companies that go and set up shop, in various regions and just try to, they kind of make the money and they go away. But who gets the phone calls from those states? If someone in Alabama it needs help and they're a new homeschooler, or maybe CPS is bothering them, or the school's threatening them to turn them into the police because they pulled their kid out, and just about, the nonsense, that stuff that you hear about, they call their state board. They don't call the national or regional conferences that come in, set up shop, and then leave. They don't call them. They call the state board because, or they
Right.
call HSLDA, which is perfect. HSLDA points them to the state board, which is appropriate,
Yes.
and that's who they call. And those state boards, those leaders, they never turn anybody away. They will sit there on the phone and they will pray with you. They will cry with you. They will talk with you, whatever you're going through, because they're the heart. They are the heart, and they want to help, and they're there for the long haul. And so anyway, that's the biggest thing I think I've seen, that the disheartening thing. The good thing I've seen in these years is just the explosion, the growth, and look, of course, look what's happened with the pandemic, and lots of circumstances that have kind of made the growth take off like a rocket. But before the pandemic, it was already growing. It has grown incredibly over the last 20 years, and the curriculum companies have just sprouted up like flowers. There are so many. You will never run out of things that you possibly might need as a homeschool parent. Everything you can think of is available. Curriculum companies have come on the scene, and there are some excellent, excellent ones, and you can find them in the pages of our magazine. We're careful. We vet our advertisers, and I myself have found incredible products that I use with my own children still, because we're still homeschooling our youngest three, and so we'll be still homeschooling for about 8 more years. Wow, that's
Wow.
a long time.
Well, I
Yeah.
just love that you touched on the state groups, because Dakota, she left a message here saying that she's tuning in. She's new to homeschooling and she didn't even know that these state groups existed. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that, because they are definitely the backbone of homeschooling in our country. So thank you for touching on that. And I don't know what state you're in, Dakota, but if you go to tryhomeschooling.com, I believe that we have a map. That's the right website, I believe, where if you go to tryhomeschooling.com, you can click on your state and you can find your support group there. So,
That's right.
and I think it's interesting that you touched on the pioneers. It was just a few weeks ago that I met a woman in the county just next to where I live, and she was one of those pioneers. She was telling me this story about how she was in the courtroom and they were going to be taking away her kids, and she fought, and then she ended up being on the state board after that, and fighting for the rights for my family now in my state too. And a lot of times we come into homeschooling, we don't realize that there were these pioneers that fought for us. So
That's
it was
right.
wonderful being able to meet her and hear her story, and like you said, her conviction.
Amen. That's right.
So right now, there's a lot of parents who either are new to homeschooling or they're considering homeschooling. What advice would you give to the mama bear, so to speak, considering pulling her child out of the public school system?
Oh, yeah. Well, this is the time to do it. If your kid is still in the public school system, honestly, and I don't want to be an alarmist, but it's a little bit dangerous. It really is, because when you consider the fact that, again, most children who go through the entire system, that I like to call it the public indoctrination centers, when they make it through that system in 12th grade, most of them will abandon their faith. Um, we see it over and over and over again. The statistics have borne it out. There are actual research papers that have been done, and you can go to neheri.com, NHERI dot org, and that's Dr. Brian Ray's website, and he is the expert. He is the expert as far as homeschool research, and he's got a lot of data, a lot of statistics. And so if you're trying to perhaps talk somebody into allowing you to take your children out of the public school system. So perhaps a mom, she still has to convince her husband that this is the way to go. I would go to nheri.org, neheri.org, and start gathering your information so that you can make a good case for that. But other than that, if you and your spouse are on the same page, um, you don't have to talk anybody into anything. For one thing, it's legal in all 50 states and in Canada and Australia and all kinds of places around the world. Not all places, because it's illegal in several countries, but here in this country and in Canada, it is completely legal. You have a right as a parent to home educate your own children, even if you yourself don't have a degree. Um, you can do it, and there's nobody who can tell you no, you can't do it. There's no reason for you to wait any longer. Now, I would say that right now, right now, there's a mass exodus out, and there's a lot of reasons for that with the different mandates going on and whatnot, and things coming down the pike, um, strong requirements and things like that. Parents are quickly recognizing, okay, I'm not waiting any longer. I got to pull them out now, because if you wait too long, it may get very difficult in the future, and I think it's going to get harder and harder to, because our freedoms are, you can see, take a look around you, you can see things are changing quickly. um, but a lot of parents wait until between the semesters, and I see a good reason for that as well. If it were me, I'd yank them out tomorrow, yesterday. They'd be out of there, because it's a godless system. The kids don't belong in there. There's public schools, no place for Christian kid. um, but if you need to wait until you want the right time, or you feel like it would be less obvious, or for whatever reason, a lot of parents do it right in between the semesters. And here we are going into November, and what is it? Sometime in December, You're out of school for a couple of weeks, because it's winter break. They don't call it Christmas break anymore. They can't do that. But at that point, they just don't bring them back with the new semester, and they send in whatever forms they need to the school district if your state requires that. Not all states do, and then they just start homeschooling. They take it and they run with it. And so my advice would be, just do it. Don't wait, just do it, and don't look back, and do it for the right reasons. It should be biblical convictions. You should be wanting your kids to be with you because you want to disciple them. Yes, education is very important. Academics are super important. They're crucial. But what's number one for a Christian family? It's discipleship. You're wanting to disciple your children, and the biblical mandate is to walk with them. To talk with them about the Lord when you're waking up in the morning, when you're walking with them, when you're laying down at night, when you're having meals. I mean, the Lord is our life. He's not just in our life, he is our life, and our children should see that. We should be modeling it. And so, what better way to disciple your child than if they're with you? Because you really can't do that too well if they're gone all day long, and then you might have a little bit of time on the weekend, unless the teachers give them so much homework that you don't see them. When I was a kid, I didn't really see my parents ever, because the teachers gave so much homework. I was gone all day long, and then I'd come home at night, and I'd be gone in my room. I'd just shut my door and just put my tape cassette player on, because I'm old. It was tape cassette player back then. And I didn't see my parents. I didn't know my siblings. I didn't know my parents. And so I don't think they could have discipled me, even if they wanted to. My mom tried to. Um, Bless her heart. But at any rate, I would just say, now's the time. It's never too late. But one day it will be too late. And you do not want any regrets. So get them out of there.
Wow. Well, thank you. And like you said, this is the time. And I just want to let anyone know, if you are considering homeschooling, like Gena said, you can pull them out right now. And if you already are homeschooling and you're still looking for resources, there is an incredible deal right now at schoolhouseteachers.com. If you head over to schoolhouseteachers.com and use code MAMABEAR, when you click the join now icon, then you can get an entire year for only $159. Plus, you get a free tote. Plus, you get a free back issue of Fall Magazine, a beautiful glossy print magazine of the Old Schoolhouse. So now is definitely the time. If you just want to maybe just check out a couple courses, you could use it over your Christmas break. And yes, I'm going to use that term. But because I can.
Yep.
And so yeah, head over to schoolhouseteachers.com and check that out. So I have one last question for you, Gena. Do you have any thoughts for the mom considering homeschooling but feels that she doesn't have the patience for it?
Oh, I love that. I love that question, and I'll tell you why. Because It kind of makes me crazy, I'll be honest. It's one of those things. What are the fruits of the Holy Spirit? My kids have to memorize those, and we go through them and we talk about them. If they're having a problem, we sit down and they rattle them off to us. What are the fruits of the Holy Spirit? Well, one of them is patience, and we're supposed to be patient. Now, given that I'm not very patient, and I should be, there are times where I am impatient and I see myself being impatient and I'm telling myself, stop it, calm down and be more patient with these kids. Just take a breath, and we all do that. But really, the answer is not to say, well, I can't do it because I'm not going to do that particular fruit of the Holy Spirit. It's kind of like saying, well, I'm not going to homeschool because I don't have the fruit of the Holy Spirit of let's see, gentleness. I'm not gentle enough, or I'm not kind enough, or I'm not loving enough. Put any of them in there. I'm not self-controlled enough. Well, get self-controlled. And I say that to myself, and I have to say that to myself every day. Get loving, get kind. What's more important? Again, you are going to blink and your children will be grown, and you do not want any regrets. You don't want to look back and go, wow, look what happened here. I just saw a story today. I was on Facebook, actually. One of my Facebook friends, she posted a story of a lady who called her crying just today, and she was saying, I blew it. I knew I was supposed to homeschool. I convinced myself that I wasn't patient enough, that that I was too busy, that I this, I that, I this, I that, just a bunch of stuff that really in the end didn't matter. And she put them on the school bus, and now her kids are grown, and none of them they've turned. They don't know the Lord. And you can't get those years back. You cannot rewind and go back and redo it. Believe me, I've made many mistakes. I have 7 children. I'd love to rewind and go back and fix this or fix that. But the reality is you can't. But the reality is right now, if you have children, you can and you should, because you've got to disciple them. Someone's going to disciple them. They will be discipled by somebody. And if it's not you, then it's going to be their peers. It could be a bad teacher, could be a mediocre teacher, could be a teacher who is kind of shares your values, but kind of doesn't. And it could be just that one thing where they don't share it that could really send them down a bad path. But it's usually not even the teachers that do the discipling, it's their peers. I remember being in public school myself, and I know who discipled me. I know exactly how I got as bad as I did before I got saved when I was 17 years old. Yeah, I was discipled all right. And really that's the way it goes. They are discipled by their peers. Someone's going to raise them. Somebody is going to, whoever's spending the time with them, you act like who you spend time with. And you really do. You become like your peers, you become like your teachers. So you really have to say to yourself, okay, I'm not patient, but I'm gonna lean on the Lord. I'm gonna cry out to him. I'm gonna say, Lord, if nothing else, make me patient, make me like you, because I'm supposed to have the mind of Christ. I'm supposed to be acting like Christ. I've got Christ living in me. And therefore, maybe not through myself and my own efforts, but through you, Lord, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. He can do it. He'll do it. And you take one day at a time, and you start your day off with prayer, and you get with that child of yours and you pray with them, and you muddle through that day. And you'll have your good days and you'll have your bad days, and there'll be some days where you're both in tears, and maybe both of you are impatient with each other, but it's okay because you're together and you're discipling them and you're drawing closer to them, because guess what? Now you know them and they know you. One of these days you're going to be old and you're going to be glad that your kid knows you. They knows, I've got a 25-year-old daughter. We are very close, and she's been homeschooled all her life. And I can't even imagine, had I sent her away all the time and not kept her with me and discipled her myself and spent time with her. And I know her so well. She knows me so well. We are each other's best friend.
Mhm.
And we are very close. And one of these days I'm going to be super old. And who do you think's going to take care of me? Hopefully
Right.
nobody. I, but really, I think we have to have perspective and look at the entire life of these children. They're not going to be kids forever. They're going to be grown-ups. Will they be walking with the Lord? Will there be any legacy that we pass on to them? How can there be if they're never around us? You have to have quality, you have to have quantity time in order to get that quality time. But you can't have any quantity time if you send them off all day. There's no time and not enough to count. So yeah, if you're not patient, you need to throw that out the window and say, well, I'm going to be patient because God commands it. I'm supposed to be patient, and I'm doing it. I'm doing it.
Wow, that is so beautiful and inspiring. And I never thought to put it in that perspective of thinking of all the fruits of the Spirit. And that is an incredible way to look at it. So thank you so much for sharing that. Well, I want to remind everyone that if you have left a comment tonight, you still have about another minute or two if you want to leave a comment, and we will be drawing one name and giving you a free membership to schoolhouseteachers.com, an annual membership. And we will message you this evening if you are the winner. And Gena, do you have any closing thoughts before we sign off tonight?
The only thing I would have to say is just get close to the Lord. As a mama, get close to the Lord. That's the best thing you can do. And how do you get close to the Lord? You pray. That's not all. You read his word. You read his word and get to know him, because as a mom, we're the ones, again, discipling these children. And if we don't know the Lord, if we don't know his word, if we don't know doctrine, how do we answer the hard questions? Get into a good church, and you probably are. Most of you who are listening, probably in a very good Bible church, Bible believing, Bible teaching church. But make sure you get that alone time, even if it's a little bit every day, and read his word, read the word, because you're the mama. You're the mama. So read his word so you can pass that legacy on to your children.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story and your encouraging words. And I just hope that everyone listening to this recording, and both now and afterward, has been encouraged. And I want to remind you, if you head over to schoolhouseteachers.com, that you can use code Mama Bear right now. That is an active code, and you can receive an annual membership for only $159, and you'll get some great freebies as well. So if you have any questions about homeschooling in general, I know you can go to schoolhouseteachers.com, and there's a chat box. You don't have to be a member. Is that correct, Gena? Anyone can go there and ask any questions about homeschooling. And I hope everyone has a great evening, and thank you so much.
Thank you.